And we need to start with a roll call.
Chairman Morris,
Here.
Commissioner Blue,
Present.
Commissioner Cotton,
Here.
Commissioner Hesder,
Here.
Commissioner Heidner,
Here.
Commissioner Mulchrone, Commissioner Gorog.
All right, this evening we have a public hearing, case 1712, being a petition filed by the Taxman Corporation requesting approval to amend the special use permit granted pursuant to ordinance 2006-51 for the Port Clinton Place PUD to 1, approve to amend that permit to allow construction of 18 townhomes with certain variations. 2, preliminary and final site and landscaping plan approval. 3, preliminary and final approval of the architectural elevation. And finally, 4, preliminary and final approval of the plat of subdivision. This property is commonly known as Lot 2 of Port Clinton Place. It is zoned R7 multifamily residential. It is located on the northwest corner of Town Center and Burn Boulevard in Vernon Hills. Okay, who's going to speak on behalf of the petitioner this evening? Okay, I see you've brought your network with you. Is anyone else going to speak?
Yes, Doug Worth, potentially Tracy Richard, the civil engineer with Manhard, and potentially the client. So,
For ease in the public hearing, whoever's going to speak on behalf of the petitioner in support of this request, if you could step forward at this point, identify yourself, and we'll swear everybody in at once. Oh yes, let me remind everybody, the primary rule we have, because this is going out on TV, is you need to speak from either one of the fixed or one of the portable microphones that are on the dais. Okay, so want to introduce each of yourself, please?
Tracy Richard, a civil engineer with the firm of Manhart Consulting.
Margie Georgopoulos with the Taxman Corporation, the developer.
Doug Worth with BSB Design Architect.
Joe Mashek with BSB Design, landscape architect and planner.
Okay, I ask each of you to raise your right hand and swear or affirm that this testimony you're about to give before this commission of the Village of Vernon Hills shall be the truth. All right, you are on, sir.
Okay. You've seen the site before a couple of times, but just to reintroduce you, Port Clinton Place row homes. Initially, it was proposed by Opus and part of the original Opus development, which was the PUD at the corner of Port Clinton Road and Milwaukee Avenue and Route 45. The development itself, our component of it, our phase, is about 1.25 acres, but as you see, it's part of the overall Port Clinton Place development. Starting with the Port Clinton Place by Opus, which was 20 row homes along Port Clinton Road. Port Clinton, this is going to be tough, excuse me. Port Clinton Place condominiums along Port Clinton Road, which is completed as well, and the recently completed Lexington Row at Port Clinton Place, which is 27 row homes along Route 45 at Town Center Road. Our site is along Town Center and Burn Boulevard. 1.25 acres. We're requesting a development, 18 row homes. The history of it, initially it was proposed by Opus as a condominium building similar to the Port Clinton Place condominiums. Recently it was reapproved as an 80-unit multifamily building. This proposal, I believe, is much more appropriate for the market right now and for essentially the speed of development to finish off this last phase of the development. We feel this is much more appropriate. The 18 units that we're proposing, what we wanted to do, first of all, was how do we fit it in with the existing phases? So really to knit it together with the row home developments on the other side of the pond. In the plan in front of you, by the way, on the left side is the north. We just for ease of presentation. So on the west side of the development is the pond, which is on the bottom of the plan. We wanted to look out over to essentially mimic what was done by Lexington. We also wanted to make sure that how we presented to Town Center Road was appropriate, so we flipped the buildings, which are on your plan as units 1 through 5, so that the fronts faced out towards Port Clinton Road. And then we have fronts facing out, units 11 through 18 face Byrne Boulevard. So effectively, all of our auto court and garages are screened from view from the public streets. The other thing that was very important was how do we continue the connection of the sidewalk along the west side of the pond from the existing Port Clinton Place condominiums and continue it along to Town Center Road to finish off the original intent of the whole neighborhood with Town Center, the commons across the street, Port Clinton Place that's been developed. So we continued the sidewalk down to Town Center Road. Now, one of the unique situations with this development is to mimic the existing developments that were previously built. We are asking for variations of the setbacks. And as you see, we're very similar setbacks along Byrne Boulevard as the Opus development was and as Lexington development was with Windward Drive. Same thing with units 1 through 5. We have a 27-foot front setback, which is a request for a variance, but you can see that it really does conform to the neo-traditional design that was intended with the overall development. The other important components is emergency access. And so to create a fire lane that continued from the existing Port Clinton Place condominiums through to Byrne Boulevard so that if there was a need for fire access or EMT access, we propose a connection next to what would be Unit 10 on the plan. That would be a permeable paver, and it would also be blocked by essentially a crash gate or an emergency gate, so that it would keep traffic from essentially creating a potential traffic concern by adding the safety gate. We've alleviated that concern. We've got 5 guest spaces, and each of the 18 units has 2 garage spaces and 2 driveway spaces. There's also public parking along Byrne Boulevard, so that could also be utilized if there was a party or additional parking for the development. The other important thing is that we kept the development within the confines of the original disturbed area of the site. The site was originally scraped and graded in preparation for the condominium building. So the development that you see here, particularly on the west side where it relates to the pond, we're within the curbed and graded area of the existing disturbed area. Now, Doug Worth is here from our firm to talk about how we're integrating the architecture with the existing developments. Thank you.
Good evening, and thank you. As Joe mentioned, the primary task with the design of the exterior elevations of the building is to be as coordinating and as sympathetic as possible to the existing Lexington, Port Clinton Place row homes. That being said, the design very much stayed within the parameters, both style-wise and material-wise, that were laid out there. So what we have is a very traditional, as Joe said, a neo-traditional elevation. Material-wise, it's a large amount of brick. Let me present the material sample board.
I don't think it's on.
Check. There we go. So large amount of brick with cast stone accents for the window heads, window sills, and some accent banding. The upper floors on the sides and rears and a small portion of the front have stucco panel with a composite trim. There we go. Architectural metals for things like railings, and then vinyl windows and steel doors. The roof is an architectural asphalt shingle, representative of what's depicted here. We would like to mention that due to the desire to be very compatible with the existing development. Our recommendation is that these materials, although they very well may be what is used, will not represent the actual approved materials. Instead, we would like to construct a site mock-up just to ensure that these materials are as compatible as possible with the existing development.
Is that because time, difference in time?
I certainly can't, other than the time needed for approval, I don't believe so.
No, it's just the time of the material has been in place, or why are you concerned?
Concerned, if we would be was not the right word to use. We have a desire to make sure that everything matches as well as is possible. And the best way to do that, we feel, is to do it in the field. Here's some images of those existing townhomes representing the style we were attempting to achieve, and I think largely it was successful. There are two unit types. We've referred to them as Unit A and Unit B. This is a floor plan, all three floor plans of Unit A. On the left is a lower floor plan with a rear load two-car garage, and to the front is the pedestrian access that accesses to a flex space. It's a flexible living room type space. Up the stairs to the main floor is a large, relatively open living space with a great room, dining room, kitchen, and then a powder and a coat room. And then up the stairs to the upper level is a master suite with a private bath and walk-in closet, two secondary bedrooms, bedroom 2 and bedroom 3, that share a hall bath and each have reach-in closets, and a washer dryer side by side and a laundry closet. That's Unit A. There are 10 of Unit A. Of the 18 units, 10 are Unit A and 8 are Unit B. I'm not sure I mentioned that Unit A is 1,839 square feet, excluding the garage. Unit B, slightly larger, 1,921 square feet. Similar configuration. However, the Unit B are the units that reside on the ends of the buildings and therefore have the opportunity for views not only to the front and the rear, but also to the sides. Outside of that, it's a relatively similar configuration, rear-loaded two-car garage, and then pedestrian access into a larger flex space at the lower level. A largely open main floor that also has a powder room, coat closet, and laundry, this time on the main floor as opposed to upstairs. And then an upper floor with a master suite with private bath, and then two secondary bedrooms sharing a hall bath. There are 4 total buildings on the site, and effectively there are 2 different building configurations, a 5-unit building and a 3-unit building. What you're looking at here is a representation of the 5-unit building. And as discussed, the Unit A's are the 3 units in the middle that are sandwiched between the 2 Unit B's on the end, and you're seeing the lower, main, and upper floor configurations. One item I want to go back, realizing I didn't touch on, is building height. The 3 floors are 9 feet in height for the first and second floors and 8 feet in height for the upper floors. We feel that the 9 feet in height for the first floor, while not necessarily an industry standard, 8 feet would be more standard. We feel the 9 feet gives a much better exterior elevation and interior quality of space. And it may not be legible, but we know that we want to achieve a maximum overall building height of 35 feet, and that's defined by the measurement to essentially the mean height of the roof. And by manipulating the slope of the roof, we've managed to stay right at that, just 1 inch under that 35 feet of maximum height, 34.11. And I think that's all for architecture.
We have the whole team here for questions, so I think that's probably when the best work gets done. So please feel free to ask questions of all of us. We have some exhibits of engineering. Don't know if we want to get into the detail of that, rather respond to questions on those issues. So I think we're here and be more than happy to address any concerns.
Okay, any questions, anyone?
Are the variations they're requesting any different than Lexington had?
No, I mean, these are generally consistent with Lexington Home. The difference really is the fact that with the Port Clinton Place development, when it was first approved as part of the plan unit development, all of those were put in place for their individual lots. And because this lot was initially approved as a multifamily apartment building or condominium building, that is, those particular setbacks weren't initially needed, so they weren't granted. And so that's why they're here this evening.
But they're not any different than what
No, they're
the
consistent.
other development is. Okay.
Anybody else?
Along your walkway, along the pond there,
Yes.
what kind of, I didn't look at all the diagrams, what kind of incline do you have there? I mean, is that a steep drop off there after the sidewalk?
It is. The sidewalk that you see up to Unit 7 is existing. The extension, the reason why you see a notch in the sidewalk, the extension of the sidewalk is the pond side is where the existing curb for the proposed parking for the condo is. So we're not affecting the slope in its existing state except for grading on either side of the sidewalk. So there might be a 2 or 3 foot disturbance to get the sidewalk in, but that slope is going to remain intact.
Does there need, I guess what I'm looking for is is there a danger here with the sidewalk being close to a steep slope?
No, there really, I don't believe so. If there is something, I think we can address that at a staff level, I would hope. But the way, and when I walked it, it looked to me like we were well within, I was going to try to get rid of that, but we're well within the, thank you, the confines of the existing, so.
Anybody else? Is it a private, who owns the sidewalk?
The sidewalk is the proposed sidewalk is on our lot. It looks like the existing sidewalk is probably on the commons for whoever controls the pond. The property for this phase of the development is shown on the plan. It follows the inside of the sidewalk, and it's the dash line right where, just off of the emergency gate. You can see a line on there that's dashed.
Oh, I see. Okay. And there's going to be a homeowners association of some sort
Yes,
on this?
yes.
Since you said you do landscape too, if you look at units 11 and 12, if people make a right turn into the garage,
Yes.
is there an issue with the headlight sweep into those units? Or is there either a berm or is there enough landscaping to avoid it?
It's a typical driveway situation. We do have landscaping on that corner and a tree proposed, so there will be some screening. The other thing is at Unit 11, if you go to the grading plan, which is included in the submittal, the grading plan, actually I don't have it on the PowerPoint, but next to Unit 10, that unit is much higher than the driveway. So if there's a sweep of the headlights, it's going to be pretty, it's going to have to be a pretty big vehicle. Unit 10 is probably 6 feet higher than that corner, maybe 5.
Unit 10 or wait. 10 or 11 we talked about.
Yeah. It's, the existing site, right now, that driveway goes to the, dips down into the parking. And the way the site was graded, there's a pretty good sized hill there.
Okay. Anybody else?
Yeah.
Pat?
Are the elevations that face each other on 15 and 16, are those the same as what you've shown as right elevation and left elevation in your submittal?
Similar, we did not provide the option or the bay window on those. We have a 12-foot separation, so the bay window is not. That's why on the floor plans, we showed them as a dashed. So the end units that face out where there's much more light and air would have the bay.
So, but not a lot of fenestration on those elevations as they face each other? Not a lot,
The same, just without the bay window.
just the same?
Yeah.
Okay.
Not being an architect at the expense of having the one to my right scowl at me, why in the front of all these buildings in this development are there what are apparently balconies but not really? They're fake. Why aren't they usable?
Well, first of all, the aesthetics. The railing that you see above on the second floor would have to be
Higher.
40 and
Right.
42 inches, and it becomes that size of an area. It kind of looks like a bear cage. That was our thought when we looked at it. It was really out of proportion. You see from the elevation that we're taking cues from the first two phases, but we're not necessarily mimicking. So one of the cues was those were just essentially dressed up, not usable balconies.
By the way, ornament is not a crime.
Okay.
Ornament for ornament's sake is okay.
Right. In our packet, and this may not be appropriately addressed to you, maybe to Margie, there's some requests about changing the declaration and easements because the way this was initially put together with cross easements and the like. I'm assuming, maybe that's a bad assumption, that these are things that are going to be addressed. They're not really an issue. This is on an email dated January 4th, 2018 from William Ratzer.
So this, just for clarification, this is an email provided to myself and the village that was provided to the Planning and Zoning Commission related to the HOA's position as relates to this development, including requests being made by the HOA to take ownership of the pond, as well as to basically amend the covenants, restrictions, and easements between the properties to lift the restriction on shared parking, or lift the allowance of shared parking.
I'm not familiar with that email, and I didn't quite hear the full question, so
I think the answer is pass.
we need to take a look at it. I've not seen the email or the request, so we need to take a look at it if it's easements and covenants and.
I think you,
I'm not sure I heard the question, but maybe I could answer it.
okay, what we're looking at, there's a January 4th email from William Ratzer actually to you, and the village has been copied on it, and it makes certain requests or suggestions with respect to amendments to the declaration of easements with respect to some of the cross easements. The gate's already been addressed. An issue with regard to deeding of the pond to the association or some other entity to own the pond.
You can come with me.
And the question is like, where does that stand, or where does it not stand?
It stands that we have met. We are in complete agreement.
Okay.
The homeowners association, I've been working with Bill, and we're working on it. And we're in complete agreement, and we're moving forward with all the legalities of it.
So right now Taxman owns the pond,
Yes.
okay? All right, okay. Anybody else?
So it's a simple deeding over of the pond. All the electric, everything's in the condo building, so it kind of doesn't make sense.
Okay,
So we're working it all out.
okay.
And the maintenance, property tax, everything associated with the pond and its maintenance and repair is all spread.
It's all part of the detention pond easement. We manage that now. Now it will be managed by, or in the near future, by the condo association.
Okay. So are there any?
Because they're the biggest group.
Sure. So
Yeah.
other than the pond, is there any other That's not really a cross easement. Are there any other sort of cross easements between then this property and anybody else that's out there?
Well, there's a master
Right.
easement for all the roads and all that. So we're keeping that in place, except the changes that will be made are Tower 1, we'll call it the Tower 1 and Tower 2 parcels, just, okay, will not have cross parking, which when Opus was going to do both of them, they could park in each other's lots. We're going to get rid of that. And also, there won't be cross access, just in that area. You still need the easements for access all throughout the rest of the development, because everybody will use those roads. The main roads, Town Center Road, all that kind of stuff, so. But we're all in agreement on it, so.
The condition of approval number 11 in the packet includes a condition that the village attorney will review, comment, approve, and any all covenants, restrictions, and easements. And that's just to sure the village also reviews those documents.
So I'm confused. Is Town Center and Burn Boulevard, are those private?
Oh, those are public roads.
So you don't need easements for those, because that's public property. So this is really a standalone, this doesn't need any easements for anything, really,
For emergency access.
just for that, yeah, okay. Okay, all right, anybody else? Okay, anything else you'd like to add? Okay, this is a public hearing, so if anyone from the public wants to speak with respect to this would be the opportunity to do so. If you do, we'd ask you to speak from the microphone and identify yourself by name and where you live for the record.
My name is Bill Ratzer. I'm one of the residents of 1199 Port Clinton. I'm also one of the board members on the association, and you recognize me from the last time we talked about this program. A couple of notes. We've been meeting with taxman, corporate representatives, with folks from the village to get this all lined up. The board has met a couple of times amongst themselves. We've talked to our residents. We've got this all sort of teed up, ready to go. We do have to have all the formal board meetings, but we'll do that in the next week or two. But there's not going to be any disagreement. We're all basically on the same page. The apartment building that we kind of worked through with all of you, that ended up being a fine solution to trying to build a giant apartment building, but nobody was really too excited about that. So now we have a project which we are excited about because it'll finish off the neighborhood. It fits in really well. It's fewer folks, fewer traffic issues, less stress on resources for the village. I just think it makes good sense. So, we're all basically in line for that. A couple of my notes here. So, we've got a pretty attractive way to finish off the property. We've talked to the folks in our building. We've talked amongst the board members. So we're basically ready to go. A couple of issues that we asked about, I couldn't quite hear, but we've asked that the parking and easement access be eliminated. That just seems to make sense. We've got kind of 3 separate properties now. We wanted to have the barrier on the fire lane just because we don't want to create a cut through for the garbage trucks or the moving trucks, things like that. That seems to make good sense as well. And then the detention pond just came up the other day. We have to find some way to take that ownership from Taxman Corp. When they sell off this property. So the thought was they could deed it to the association. We would still manage it. We are part of the process that manages it now. There's 3 associations that share the expense. We'll just keep doing that. We would become the operator, kind of the lead association. So it's kind of our sweat equity to get that going. There's no value to the pond. We're not going to pay them or have our residents burdened by taking that on. But we'll figure that one out. That's a little bit of a new issue. We've talked to our attorney. We've got kind of the basic building blocks worked out, but we have to go through the process amongst ourselves to get that done. But there's no real downside for us in doing that. It's just more of a mechanical issue to make sure that there's no hidden issues. And I talked to Margie about it. There aren't, but we'll be careful about that. Otherwise, we're basically ready to go. Do you guys have any questions of our association, of our people as part of this? I guess I'd like to turn it back that way.
And we're to understand that you're speaking here both as a resident who is a neighbor to this property, as well as on behalf of the homeowners association.
Yeah, I live in the building on the other corner, so I kind of live in what this will be, just for the fun of it. We have the townhomes directly across from our windows and our balconies, so I know what that's all about. It's not, we don't have we're trying to protect everyone's view as much as we can. This is actually much better than an 80-unit apartment building, so you can't argue that. It will, catch the eye on some of the windows on the 09 units in the corner on the other side of the building, but just like it does off of my apartment. So I can speak as a resident that, you'd love to have Lake Tahoe in the distance. We don't have that, but, we'll be fine. In terms of the board, we're very much in favor of this because it takes away all the things that we were worried about a year ago, the traffic issues, the trash hauling, moving trucks, an apartment building with 30 or 40 moves a year versus 18 row homes with 2 moves a year, 4, or whatever it might be. It's a huge difference for us, and so we're just very happy to see this going the way it is. Anyway, so we'll finish we're basically good. We'll finish all the formal processes to make sure it's done right. We could take care of that. I did have one question. I don't know how to switch this back to the overall look. Can somebody do that for me? Because one of my residents had a question for me this afternoon. I just want to point something out real quick. The concern was if you look at the guest parking spots, there's no real sidewalk access to the front doors. So I just wondered if that was part of the plan, or if that could be built in. For example, the guest parking closest to our building, if folks were to park there and wanted to go to unit number 10 to go for their dinner party, there's no way to get to the front door of unit 10 other than crossing the grass, going down that little fire lane. I just wondered if there's some way to tie some sidewalks into the guest parking. I'm sure that you guys they'll figure that out. My only other connection, my personal question was the sidewalk connection. There is an elevation change right there, so we got to be careful we don't create, a higher sidewalk right on the edge of the street like that. So again, that's something they'll take care of. But otherwise, I think we're pretty good. I mean, if other folks want to speak tonight, I'm happy to have them do that. But we've been spending a lot of time with this from the prior project and now, so I think we're pretty well understanding what's going on. Any questions for us?
Okay.
Okay.
Nope, thank you.
You bet.
Anyone else wish to speak this evening?
Hello, my name is Larry Moeller. I'm a resident of 1199 East Port Clinton Road. I happen to live on one of the end units that face this development, and the only thing I'll say about Bill's comments is he did speak as a resident. The building as a whole has not talked about it, so I don't think it's quite fair to say it represents the views of the HOA in total, but I do think we're all pretty much on the same page, and I think we will get there. I had a couple questions. For units 10 and 11, how far are they from the southeast corner of our building? Do you know approximately how many feet?
I'm looking that up. I've got it written down here somewhere. I don't offhand, but I can take a look.
Okay.
Yes,
Yeah, I'd just like to know that. 75 to 80 feet, okay. And how much of a setback?
75 to 80 feet, is that what the petitioner is saying?
That's from the
Hard to
very,
hear back there, so you
very
gotta come
corner
up
of our
if you want to
building
speak up.
to
The corner of
the
the
wall.
building to the corner of.
Need you to speak from wait, stop. Need to speak from a microphone. Okay.
$80 feet from the corner of Unit 11 to the corner of the Port Clinton Place condominiums.
And how about 10? How about unit 10?
It's approximately. Is there more questions or?
No, fine.
It's approximately the same. It might be closer to 75. We're taking measurements off of, it would be farther away than if it were a condominium building.
And one more question. Go back. How much of a variance from the sidewalks on both sides are you asking for?
The underlying zoning requires a 30-foot front setback, and we're requesting a reduction in that so that it essentially matches what Opus did on the other townhouse.
How much of a reduction?
I can't see, and I don't have it off the top of my head,
I
however.
could, I've got that if I can
We-
provide
yeah.
for
Okay.
reference. From the south, it's 12.5-foot setback. From the north, it's an 11.5-foot side yard setback. And those are, rear yard setback is 15 feet.
Rear yard is,
Rear yard would be adjacent to the detention pond.
okay. Okay. Just one comment, which doesn't impact us at all, is those units close to the pond, they're gonna be so close to the fountain that there's a noise factor there that I think will be a problem for owners. So I'm just pointing that out. Doesn't impact us. It could impact sales and could cause problems. One issue that we see that I think is easily fixable, so we're not recommending any, when I say we, I'm speaking for most of the 09 owners, changes to what you have there. But if you take a look at parking, the other townhouses have, I think, about 1 space per unit. This has 5 spaces, but then you add Burn Boulevard and you have 16 spaces for 18 units. Is that correct? Am I correct in that?
No, this one has 2 interior and 2 exterior spaces per unit plus 5 additional guest parking for everyone.
Okay, so I'm just talking about guest parking. I'm not talking about the interior or garage. There's 11 guest parking spaces. I mean, 16 guest parking spaces. My only concern for that is, and I have an easy solution for it, so I'm not recommending anything dramatic, is I have seen on occasion, particularly during the warmer weather, because of the parking shortage in the retail complex and the commons, a few cars parking close to Town Center Road on Burn Boulevard. So they're using up some of that space, some of those spaces. If somebody comes and those parking spaces are taken, and let's say the only space they have is unit number 11, to park on the street in front of unit number 11, but they want to go to unit number 10, they have to walk across to that driveway, down to the front sidewalk to access that unit. An easier thing for them to do, which we're trying to avoid, is for them to come into our lot and park on our side. So if we get that parking easement eliminated, that's huge. Another suggestion is there's a space between, excuse my vision, between units 15 and 16, there's a space. I would suggest, and again, this doesn't matter really that much to us, if you flip those buildings and make that a sidewalk, the sidewalk access would come in somewhere around unit number 13. So if somebody parked there and they wanted to go to unit number 10, they cut through that sidewalk, they come up that access lane. There's, as Bill pointed out, there's no sidewalk to walk across to get to unit 10 if there's a sidewalk there. And the sidewalk between those units along Burn Boulevard, that solves that problem. Does that seem like something reasonable? It does not?
Well, wait. You can give the comments. They ultimately, as the petitioner, need to respond if they choose to change to the village board or to the commission, and we're really not in a position to ask them this evening to
Oh, okay.
re-engineer.
All right.
But yeah, but the comment is taken, and, you know, you guys have to decide as a developer the impact it has.
Okay.
You know,
The site was originally developed for 2 almost identical footprint buildings. So this is a little bit of a square peg in a round hole, but it's a win-win because the density is lower, and I think it's fairly safe to say everybody in our complex is probably happy with it. But on our end units, by doing that, you're expanding the footprint of the buildings we have to look at. So we're looking at the sides of buildings and a garage court. The only thing we would ask, and I could say, I think I'm safely speaking for the residents of the 09 units, is if there could be significantly enhanced landscaping on the side of 10 and 11, between our lot lines, and also something a little more enhanced than planting grass on those peninsulas between the garages, that would be huge. And I'd even throw out the idea, which I'm sure the developer wouldn't want to incur the expense of, something like brick pavers for the center court lane, and that adds value and can be added to the cost. The last issue, again, a minor one, is there is a curb cut in our garage ramp. That curb cut was put in there for an access ramp to the other building, which was recently approved for the Taxman Corporation. Now what's going to happen? That's unfinished. I would like to see Taxman Corporation, and I'm sure it's minor, pay for the completion of the curb. Do you understand what I'm referring to? Those are my comments. Thank you.
We actually have a landscape plan. Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Let me do it. Here we go. Here's one. So there's, okay, anyone else from the public? All right, then at this point, we can close the public comment portion of this meeting. Use the petitioner, want to make any additional comments?
Really appreciate your time tonight, and we will take under consideration the comments we heard tonight.
Okay, and then just for clarity, looking at the landscape plan, just so we have a clear record, although it's painted in green on this rendering,
Yes.
on your landscape plan, you want to comment, there's addition, this is not just the landscaping, this is more.
Exactly.
Okay, do you want to maybe just comment very quickly on that?
Yeah, the islands have perennials and shrubs. There's a lot more that you see. There's a lot more filigree that you see than you do on the PowerPoint presentation. So there are a lot more plantings. But we will take all of the comments under consideration.
Okay, okay.
You were speaking about the little islands between the units, right?
Yes, those would be the driveway islands that were of a concern, plus all of the foundation plantings. There's a lot more foundation plantings than what you see.
And what you're putting in on the islands between the units are going to be salt resistant?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, anybody else? Okay. I assume we sent notices out on this one. Do we get any other comments other than what we have in our packet?
There was one resident who, I believe from the 9 part of the portion of the condominium association, who did provide some comments to me. She expressed kind of similar concern as it relates to landscaping that were addressed by Mr. Moeller. She also expressed questions as it relates to the type of roof shingles being utilized. I know those are architectural roof shingles being used. She just had a question about that and wondered, since she'll be looking down on that, she was curious to know what that would all entail. She also had a comment about what view from the side of the I believe it would be the building number 11, or maybe perhaps it was building number 10, that she would see, and just wondering, aesthetically speaking, whether any additional improvements would be made to those. I indicated to her that we have brought that to her attention of the petitioner, who has not expressed interest in any additional improvements to the buildings. They wanted to keep it very consistent with what's existing in the development.
Okay, all right. And we also have 18.3 standards for a special use request that are made part of the record that are in our packet. So is there anything else from the commission? Okay. Turn to the right page. So we have a standing motion on this commission to recommend approval So our first motion this evening would be to recommend to approve and amend the special use permit for a planned unit development to allow an amendment to the site plan to allow construction of 18 townhomes, along with the certain variations as discussed in the packet, including but not limited to setbacks. We have conditions of approval in our packet, which are 1 through 11, and I think this evening we learned that there was a 12th one, that the petitioner would work with the 1199 East Port Clinton Road Condominium Association regarding the detention pond ownership and management, as well as revisions as necessary to the easement with respect to cross-access and cross-parking. Okay, so anything else? If not, we need a second for that motion.
I'll second.
Okay, any discussion? Okay, we need a roll call.
Commissioner Blue?
Yes.
Commissioner Cotton?
Yes.
Commissioner Hesder?
Yes.
Commissioner Heidner?
Yes.
Commissioner Mulcrone? Commissioner Grog? Chairman Morris?
Okay, next we have a motion to recommend preliminary and final site and landscape plan approvals, subject to the conditions we just described, including the additional condition 12, and we need a second for that.
Second.
Any discussion? Okay. The only point I would make is, I don't know whether this is site or landscape, there is a point to be made that it's hard to get from the front to the back of some of these buildings that are along the pond. So maybe there should be some consideration to a way of access rather than just through the either the lawn or I guess the entry exit. As
And
how
and
that
it
is
doesn't
addressed.
have to be, it doesn't have to be through the center of it. It could be
Right.
around, both sides.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, we need a roll call for that, unless there's anything else. Okay,
Commissioner Cotton?
Yes.
Commissioner Hesder?
Yes.
Commissioner Heidner?
Yes.
Commissioner Mulcrone? Commissioner Grog? Chairman Morris?
yes.
Commissioner Blue?
Yes.
Next, we have a motion to recommend preliminary and final approval of the architectural elevations submitted. I guess they're also subject to the same conditions, including the 12th condition we discussed. We need a roll call. We first need a second on that, I'm sorry.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? Okay, we need a roll call.
Commissioner Hesder?
Yes.
Commissioner Heidner?
Yes.
Commissioner Mulcrone? Commissioner Grog? Chairman Morris?
Yes.
Commissioner Blue?
Yes.
Commissioner Cotton?
Yes.
Then finally, we have a motion to recommend approval of the preliminary and final plat of subdivision, subject to the conditions of approval that we've already discussed, including the addition of condition 12. We need a second for that.
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, we need a roll call.
Commissioner Heidner?
Yes.
Commissioner Mulcrone? Commissioner Grog? Chairman Morris?
Yes.
Commissioner Blue?
Yes.
Commissioner Cotton?
Yes.
Commissioner Hesder?
Yes.
Can I just ask one clarification question? It's really for the village. Where it says in conditions or departures 8 and 9, we're talking about development sign and advertising signs. Those aren't the final permanent signs, just to be clear,
Correct.
Okay.
Those would be for the temporary,
during sales.
yes.
Okay. All right. Anything else we need in this one? Anything else we can do for anybody? All right. We appreciate you. This goes to the board.
First meeting in February.
All right. Thank you. Okay. And thank you. And we should note from the commission's perspective, I know this has been here several times in different iterations. We're thankful and very appreciative of the fact that the developer was able to work in a collaborative fashion with the adjoining residents and owners to come up with something that everyone seems to feel is a very palatable, very positive addition to the village, but perhaps even more importantly to the particular neighborhood in the village. So, okay. Do we have any development review this evening?
So we have a Planning and Zoning Commission meeting scheduled for January 31st. That is for River's Edge. That was remanded back to the commission by the village board at a committee of the whole meeting in December. Essentially what happened since River's Edge appeared before the commission, they reduced the density of their proposal from 59 units down to 52 units. And they also revised the site plan to comply with the required parking variations. So now no parking variation is being requested, so now they have a ratio of 2.3 units, or spaces per unit. Based off of the commission's recommendation at the time, which was a very strong negative recommendation, the committee felt like it was necessary and appropriate to remand it back to the Planning and Zoning Commission for review and to verify if there's any changes in the recommendation for the commission. Otherwise, we'll likely be scheduling a, not a public hearing, but a Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. Actually, it will be a public hearing in February. There will be, there's a couple items coming up. One is small cell site regulations, which would be an amendment to our zoning code. There's some state legislation that's going forward to regulate those, and it's on a legislative hold, which essentially means it's been approved through both Senate and House. However, Senator Cullerton put a motion to reconsider, which now kind of puts it in a legislative limbo until he releases it for the governor's signature. So with that in mind, we're trying to get ready for the ultimate signature of that. And part of that means we need to move forward with having zoning regulations to govern small cell sites. And Mike Atkinson will be here that evening to walk through the details and govern kind of what we can do to control that.
What is a small cell site versus
So
large, I suppose?
you see monopoles are outside our village hall, large kind of single-use towers. Have got and you see a lot of water towers throughout communities that have a number of cellular antennas or radio waves connected to them. The village historically, and villages across Illinois, have ground lease agreements with those individual tenants, and it's a nice revenue producer for the village, and it generates quite a bit. With that, though, is what we've found, or what the telecommunication industry has found, is they need additional bandwidth for all of the users that they have. If you think of all the technology of your house, they're looking for these small cell sites to help with capacity and help with also to kind of collect and be able to kind of spread out the data usage. And so they're proposing literally smaller boxes that would essentially go onto light poles, ComEd poles, or maybe their even own pole themselves, to be throughout communities and neighborhoods, and wants to install those. This is very similar to how AT&T negotiated directly with the state with a franchise cable agreement. Then all of a sudden you see all these boxes pop up throughout the communities. This is essentially the same thing. This legislation will restrict municipalities' ability to regulate where these go. A number of lobbyist groups with the Northwest Municipal Conference, IML, and other municipal leagues have banded together to try to add restrictions and add licensing requirements to try to give us more authority of where they go, and especially for communities like ours that don't have ComEd poles and have made enhancements to decorative street lighting. The thought of having some of these on there is obviously something that a lot of communities want to see.
So it give them a right to do it regardless of whose pole it is?
Correct. And so there's questions about how we regulate that, and there's ways to regulate some of it, and so that's what we're trying to do. But we need to have this go before the commission and for zoning change to add to that. So it's Senator Link was the sponsor of the bill, in case you were curious. Yeah. Otherwise, that is it at the moment. We've got a number of different interests with the former P&Z Bank building. Nothing definitive. We've had everything from
Empty lot, right?
yeah, empty lot. The latest proposal was for 2 buildings, both with a drive-through. I've asked them to come back and take a closer look at that. Another item that will be going before the village board at a committee of the whole for a concept presentation is for the Sports Authority building. Bears Fit is going to be going there. It is going to be a boutique health club that is a joint partnership between the Chicago Bears and a gentleman who is the part owner of the Sacramento Kings, but also owns and kind of the creator of the 24/7 fitness concept. So this will take over the entire space. Because it's a permitted use, It likely will not be going to the Planning and Zoning Commission, but directly to the Committee of the Whole. But it is within our core retail area, so it requires a building and use conversion to go from a retail sales tax producing user to a non-retail sales tax using user. So that's coming up development related. And otherwise, we've heard recent contact with McAllister's. There's that, I don't know if you recall, but there's that empty space to the south. They have expressed interest in putting a Dunkin' Donuts there and having a second drive-through. We need to take a closer look at how 2 drive-throughs would work and whether or not they're sharing 1 lane, how that would impact our existing Dunkin' Donuts stores, and kind of verifying how that's going to work with traffic flow, especially in light of other proposals we have very close to that property as well. And then at some point, we will also begin the technical review process for the proposed kindergarten center for District 73. They have been working in partnership with the Park District, the library, and the village to construct an approximately 34,000 square foot building addition for 18 classrooms, including maker spaces, sensory rooms, and some very, very small amount of office space. And so that will be going for our technical review. Right now, it's going through process of reviewing how bus and vehicle access will take place so as not to impact Aspen Drive, some of which includes plans that may involve Phillip Road and a potential connection there. And so we're moving forward with that process as well.
How's the ice skating rink doing on the second floor of the mall?
I've heard it's been doing very well. I've stepped in there before. They've talked about potentially adding a few additional panels to the inside because I feel like
To make it bigger, you mean?
to make it a little bigger.
Isn't that what we said?
But they seem to be doing well. The mall seems to be happy with them, and
It was crowded when I went by there a couple times.
Do we know what food establishments are going into Melody Farms? It's the biggest question I get all the time is what restaurants are going in there?
so their Facebook page seems to always have more information than I usually do. Their latest was a chain called Be Good, which is a farm-to-table outlet, primarily East Coast, that looks like it could be good. And then, I know Kuma's Corner has been, it sounds like they had a signed lease. I'm still waiting for the ink to dry on that signed lease. But I know that's something that is still, we're hopeful that will move forward with. I've heard Road Team Mediterranean Grill may have a signed lease. I've heard Massage Envy, which is not a food place, but has a signed lease. And then, I mean, that's the extent of what I'm aware of at the moment.
So not much.
No.
Okay.
But I think that'll pick up once a lot of those buildings have been built out and are visible.
Well, now, what about the completion of the restaurants on the first level underneath the AMC?
So those, there's an interesting story behind those. Westfield maintained leasing rights over those, and Westfield, as you've noted, hasn't been actively engaged in that area. That expired, I think, a month ago. So now Centennial, who owns them all, has the ability to work on those leases, and they intend to aggressively pursue developing those. From the conversations I've had with the mall ownership, it sounds like Westfield did not do their due diligence on a lot of the tenants and may have really failed to do some credit checks, as evidenced by one of the potential tenants going into bankruptcy midway through completion of the project, and literally stopped working on it because bills weren't being paid. So you've got a nice bar area and already other things already built, and they're just there. Unfortunate, but it's not for lack of wanting it to be. That's right.
Is that the one that has the sign up? There's a sign there for some,
So the Chef Yan Can is still supposed to move forward. That's one of the ones that they need to work with a little bit closer with. There was a BZ's Twisted Cuisine at one point. It was an outlet out of Pittsburgh, and that's the one that went through got a sheriff's sale, and there was, yeah.
They're talking like a Japanese, one of those steakhouses, those meat places,
Yeah,
like a
there
Brazilian,
was,
Brazilian thing or whatever.
yeah, Brazilian steak place that had a signed lease, and there was discussion and disagreement with labor costs.
Then the last question I'll always ask is Bally's.
Bally's, so now Centennial owns it, and what they have said is they plan on keeping it for another 2 years and then selling.
They need a tax loss.
I guess.
Okay.
It just sits there.
Yeah.
It's always good to know that it's not always the village that can control
No,
these things.
I get it.
Sometimes
No,
their
really,
property owners have business reasons for keeping any vacant. And we've had a number of different folks who have expressed interest. We had a funeral home that was very interested in the property. Would have been a good use.
Yeah, especially next door.
you know, funeral homes are destinations.
It's a growth industry.
Gotta pick your
You're
spot.
bad.
They really wanted the pool.
I'm sure, yes.
All right, that it?
Good.
Are we
That
on,
is it.
what, I don't recall when we approved the development at 45 and Buffalo Grove Road that they were gonna strip
I didn't
the
either.
site completely.
Yeah,
I thought they
there's
were
a few more
preserving
trees gone
certain
than we saw on a
shares.
plan.
Yeah.
Trees.
So what happened with that is, and then this is something we talked to our landscape architect quite a bit, is that when they started removing the trees, what they found is that a lot more trees in there were in bad shape or dead or dying, and it really required additional removal. Because all along 45, I mean, the intent, my understanding was, I mean, those trees were staying.
Yeah.
And that was what was supposed to, and when they reviewed it, I mean, a lot of those trees were hollow. And so that wasn't, I mean,
They don't look how the stumps that are, I mean, the cut up portions that are sitting there, they don't look very hollow.
and I know, I mean, yeah, I mean, I was very surprised to see how much got removed as well, because I know that wasn't the intent, I know, at all.
Did we have our landscape people look at it?
Yeah, no, they were the ones that reviewed it and signed off on the trees being removed.
We haven't seen any change in their bank accounts, have we?
They're very attentive to the landscaping, but that was one of the areas that it was really disappointing to see, because I know that was something that I particularly liked the development because of how much trees were being kept and preserved, and then you see what happened, and it's too bad.
Okay. All right, we have approval of the minutes of October 4th, 2017. Any comments on those? If not, we need a second.
I'll second.
Okay, we can do that by acclamation. All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay, that passes. If that's all we have, we have a motion to adjourn. We need a second. All in favor of that?
Aye.
Opposed? We're adjourned. Good night.